Welcome, Cecily Cortez. I'm
Hi,
happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here, Jill. Thank you for having me.
Cecily is going to share with us integrating Montessori principles in your learning environment. She is a life and leadership coach. She is a school consultant and head of school and brings a tremendous amount of knowledge and life experience in leading to whole child, whole educator practices. I'm very thrilled to have you here with us. And I would be delighted to have you just introduce yourself by telling us who you are and what you're up to.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. My name is Cecily. I live in Southern California in the San Diego Oceanside area, and I have become really through years of informal coaching and consulting, now an official coach and consultant, where I work with people on, really just becoming the best person they can be, the best leader they can be. And another one of my passions is working with small schools or big schools, but mostly smaller schools on professional development, working with, you know, teachers or students or parents who need a little bit more support and offering my services to schools as well. I have been a school leader at a Montessori school for the last 7 years, and that has been, wow, so fun and full of so many lessons. I'm also really grateful to have worked with amazing mentors and teachers of my own who, when the lessons come, it can be easy to just gasp and be so grateful to be done with it. But um, they've really helped me incorporate that whole person learning, and now I'm able to offer that to others too. So I'm really happy to be here and to talk about how we can bring the Montessori philosophy and lessons that we've learned in Montessori into any learning environment. If you don't have a Montessori school, that's okay. But also, what I really want to touch on is we can bring aspects of the Montessori philosophy into the way that we lead other adults specifically. And that's something I'm really excited to talk to you about today.
And you do bring so much wealth of knowledge and, may I mention, a generous spirit. I find it very generous that you are offering an entire free coaching session or clarity call that you offer as well as part of that. And it can be connected with through your backlinks, but let's just name them here. CecilyCortez.com. And I think you'll have that up on a slide for us to see as well.
Yep, you'll be able to contact me there. My email is cecily@cecilycortez.com if at any point you want to connect. I do offer free clarity calls to the public. So those are 20-minute calls just to identify if we are a good match and if we can work together and if my services are fitting to what you need. But in addition to that free clarity call, I am offering one free coaching session for anyone who's interested. And if you have more questions about anything that we cover today, that would be a perfect time to ask.
Excellent, excellent. Well, do please share information through your slide presentation. I was happy
Sure.
to see just a brief introduction that we can use as the foundation for our conversation.
Sure, let me pull it up. Um, Here it is. So I know that we have the title, integrating Montessori principles into every classroom. But I kind of think of it as Montessori everywhere. Montessori every day, Montessori every time, Montessori all the time. And that's something that I'm really excited to talk to you about today. I know that the reach of this summit is large. So you might be on the other end of this thinking, well, I don't work at a school, or I stay home and I'm just looking to homeschool, or I'm the CEO of a very large organization. How is this going to apply? But my goal today is to really show you how that's going to apply and see if I can convince you to start adding in some Montessori principles into your work and into your life. So, what is Montessori? If you are not familiar with the term Montessori, it is an educational theory and philosophy that uh, is used in early childhood and reaches through adolescence. There's also a lot of new work being done with um, adults and folks who suffer from dementia and Alzheimer's. That's being really developed right now and showing to be very successful. Um, these are all based off of the work of Dr. Maria Montessori. She did her work in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and developed really strong curriculum. I could go on and on about what Montessori is. We can save that for another conversation. It is so much more than just one slide than what I could fit into one slide. But we'll talk a little bit more about aspects of Montessori in the coming slides. For those of you who don't know, Montessori is a style of education very popular around the world. So, two parts of Montessori education, and when we lead Montessori schools, there's two things that we focus on, um, in addition to many others, but these are the two that I want to highlight today. The first is the prepared environment. On the bottom right hand side of the screen, you see an image. This is an image of shelves in what looks like to be a primary classroom or children's house classroom with children from ages 3 to 6. And you will see that there are beautifully laid out trays with items. When I look at this photo, I see clean, organized, um, easy to access materials for children from 3 to 6 years old. And this is a part of the prepared environment. The way that we, for lack of better terms, prepare the classroom every day and every semester intentionally thinking about the developmental needs of the person who's going to use it. So this classroom is for 3 to 6. You wouldn't find something that looks like this, exactly like this, in a classroom that is for children from 9 to 12, an upper elementary classroom. That classroom would look different because the developmental needs of that child are different. Same with an infant classroom, a needle class for children who are, from birth to approximately 15 to 18 months. Their shelves are going to look differently than this because they have different developmental needs. The other part that I love and one of my favorite things to read about is Montessori's idea of the prepared adult, and that's saying that being a teacher, being a guide in the class is not just about curating beautiful spaces like you see in the photo. Um, that's not what it's only about. It's also about developing ourselves, understanding what the long term goals are, understanding what the data shows us to be developmentally accurate, and then preparing ourselves internally to provide that to the children. So, these are two aspects of Montessori that I really wanted to highlight. And this can be done in any environment. If you work at public school that maybe you teach 6th grade, how can you bring in Montessori into that 6th grade classroom? And why would you want to bring Montessori into that 6th grade classroom? um, you can prepare the environment. And I know you already do. That's not an assumption I'm making that you don't already prepare it. But think about ways that we can match the level of detail, organization, um, ease of access in the photo that we see here into your classroom, into your space, into your office. I have been a school leader for the last 7 years, and I would think about often, how am I preparing the office for the parents who are going to come and visit, for the children who might need to spend some time here with me, and also for our staff so that they feel like this is a space for them as well. So, this is a really wonderful opportunity to talk a little bit more about how we do Montessori everywhere, how we do Montessori every single time. The first thing I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I focus specifically on this topic at variety of professional development trainings that I do, is the power of observation. I could talk about observation for an hour, but I'm going to talk about it for a moment now. Um, Observation in the Montessori philosophy means to take note, usually literally take notes of the data that you see going on in front of you. This is different from record keeping. This is, this is not, this child was presented this lesson, they are not proficient, they need more practice. That's different. What is the child choosing to do? Where is the child being driven to in the classroom? Where is the child showing more joy than in other areas? Where is this child getting more frustrated? The same can be applied to adults in your space. So if you are a school leader or a leader of any sort, and you are responsible for the development of adults, or ensuring that adults are doing their job, observation is this incredibly powerful tool that I hope you start to use. The goal is, based off of your observation, to be able to formulate what happens next with the data that you have. Observation is incredibly powerful data. In Montessori environments, just as an aside, we don't often do a lot of um, regular testing. We don't give a kindergartner a sheet with all of the letters and see which ones of these do you know in a very short time frame. Um, our our assessment of the child happens primarily through observation. So the power of observation can be incredibly profound for everyone in your space. It also allows you an opportunity to try to be objective and to try to understand what's happening. When, as a school leader, when I'm approached by a teacher who says, Cecily, there's a child and I am stumped. I have tried everything. I don't know what to do anymore. I need some help. Or in other cases, they can't come, they are not good fit for my classroom. You need to find another teacher. I'm at my wit's end. And that happens. That happens as educators, even in the Montessori classrooms. My job as a head of school or as a school leader is to offer this teacher opportunities to gather data. Don't come to me with emotions, come to me also with data. Come to me with both. And the way that we do that is through observation, to say, today he or she chose this work, worked on it for this long, and then moved to this. I want to understand what's happening with the child all day to be able to make an assessment and to be able to make a plan for what's next. So you can start by observing. I think that that's a really, really, really great place to start. Another thing that you can incorporate into your work as a teacher, or into your work as a leader, or into your work as a parent, a friend, um, you know, anyone who has any space, whether it's a room, whether it's a home, whether it's an office, a classroom, the prepared environment. And what the prepared environment does is it provides a place for everything and a reason for that place. I spoke in the last slide about developmentally appropriate prepared environments. So if you have a traditional kindergarten classroom, and things that children need often, like pencils or erasers or um, glue, are in an area where they can't access it, where they need your help all the time, that may stump a child's creative process, right? That may stump a child's um, need for independence. So thinking about, who is this space for? This space that I'm sitting in right now is for me, it's my office. And do I have what I need available to me to be successful? That's the question that we start with when we're thinking about the prepared environment. That's a question that you can start with. Is this kitchen is this kitchen preparing me for success? Is this um traditional preschool class for toddlers, is this toddler classroom setting up the children for success? Is it offering them opportunities to grow and to be challenged, but also to meet their needs? The next thing that I want to talk about is an uninterrupted work period. We do have uninterrupted work periods in our Montessori classrooms. They are the most beautiful times where children are free to work on materials that they know how to use. It varies a little bit depending on age, what the parameters are, what the boundaries are, but it's an it's not a work period where the bell's going to ring in 20 minutes, so then we all work in math, or the bell's going to ring in 20 minutes, so then we're all going to go out to eat snack. um, this is a period of time that we hold very sacred and that we protect. Children have a lot of freedom during this time, and there's also some very clear limits. And that's what I want you to bring into your space. Offering the folks that you work with, the folks that you serve, freedom with clear limits. If something's not working, go back to step number one, do some observation, identify if the concern is in the environment, if there's something in the environment that needs to be adjusted, or identify if there's something, um, you know, outside of the environment, maybe in the intangible environment with personalities or limits that have been set that needs to be addressed. This is something that I love to talk to folks about when we're meeting one-on-one or in small groups about, they might have a concern about a teacher, or they might have a concern about a particular child, and they're feeling really out of resources and out of ideas for them. We think about it, this is how we do it. Like, does this child have uninterrupted time to explore, and what are they doing during this time? I'm also referring to the uninterrupted work period for play as well. I'm not suggesting in any way that you offer the people that you serve, uninterrupted time to be outside, or uninterrupted lunch breaks, or, extended periods of freedom. Um, but when they do have freedom, let them be free. And ensure this what this would look like for a child is ensure that the space the child is in is free of um, anything that's going to hurt the child, or that the child can hurt anyone else with. But then sit back and watch. Sit back and watch what happens when children play. The fourth thing that I want to talk about is grace and courtesy. This is a very traditional Montessori term that we use almost every day in our Montessori schools. Grace and courtesy refers to, for lack of better terms, the building of respect, practicing good manners, identifying yourself as a being in a space. So knowing how you move your body, and ensuring that your body is not harming anything in the environment nor anyone, and that your words are kind. So one of the first grace and courtesy lessons that we might learn is saying good morning, or tucking in your chair, or uh, putting materials back where they go after we're done using them. But what I always and constantly tell the folks that I work with in regards to grace and courtesy is that we cannot expect anything of the child that we are not willing to offer as well. So in Montessori classrooms, you typically have two guides. One is a head teacher, and one is an assistant, or a lead guide and an assistant. And if I see a guide who comes to me and says these children won't stop fighting, they're always arguing, they're taking everything from each other, and I think, what type of example are we offering? Are you using really good communication with your assistant, the person you're working with? Are you constantly, embodying and modeling the idea of what it is to be a kind human in a space? Many times, yes, and there's other things that need to be resolved, but sometimes no. Sometimes it's very clear that the children are picking up bad habits from the adults in the space. And grace and courtesy is a powerful tool, I will say. And when the classroom is working at its highest potential, there's a lot of grace and courtesy there. So it's something that needs to be worked on. It's also something that, like, practicing for just the average, yeah, to use an average term, practicing manners is something that has to happen consistently. It's not something that we only focus on in the beginning of the school year. On the contrary, it's something that we have to almost focus on more in the middle, and in the middle of the school year and towards the spring. So incorporating opportunities for grace and courtesy, and teaching grace and courtesy really intentionally is something that I recommend you do in any space that you have. And the last thing is prioritizing personal and professional growth. And when I added this to the slide, I really think more about those of you who are leaders, or those of you who work with adults, who you have the capacity to grow. I personally take my role as head of school or school leader incredibly seriously. And I have a team right now of, I think, somewhere between 18 and 20 teachers. And it is my duty every single day to ensure that they are that they are growing, that I'm offering them opportunities to learn. That's not me fixing any of their mistakes. That's me ensuring that they're challenged and that when they come to me with a problem, that I'm not solving it for them, that I'm ensuring that they have the tools to strengthen themselves. And sometimes that looks like, um I read this blog post, why don't you check it out? Or I see that you're having this problem. I've had a lot of people come to me with this problem, and I've had this problem in the past myself. I read this book and I think it would be really helpful. Here are the cliff notes. Let's chat about it in a week. Um, Offering everyone in your space the opportunity for continual growth is incredible. No, you will have so much to offer them. Um, and then I also kind of think of it as, these folks that we're working with one day, they're going to be the leaders. And I want them to be those types of leaders too, the types of leaders that inspire action, that inspire challenge, that inspire growth in the people that they're leading to. So, I know this was a lot. Jill and I will continue to talk about it a little bit, but if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact me. I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you. I hope that you take the opportunity to have those, couple of calls with me to discuss kind of what's going on in your situation and how we might be able to help. So, Jill, I'm going to stop sharing, and here we are.
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much for all this valuable information. There's just so many points that I'd love to continue on as I think about the themes in this overall summit. And as I also think about the questions that people might be coming up with. And let's just start about the prepared environment. One of the things that I see is that you're talking about it's unique for each setting, and it is calling for an intentionality, right? That you are making it set up for success, as you said. And one thing I wanted to also focus on is it encouraging independence. You had mentioned that, and I'd like to have you flesh that out a little bit more.
Sure. So, for anyone who is familiar with Montessori or even slightly familiar with Montessori, one of the aspects of our philosophy, one of the goals of why we do what we do is for children to gain independence. A lot of that is um, just functional independence. Can my 2-year-old learn to put on his shoes independently? Or, can my 6-year-old, I don't know, for lack of, ideas, can they, complete their homework, or can they pack their own lunch? And the goal is not for the child to be independent. They have parents and their parents love them dearly, and there's shared responsibilities. But what we do when we're teaching a 2-year-old to put on their jacket or their shoes is there's so much fine motor skill, development that's happening at that moment. And there's also a layer of confidence that's being built. I'm not by any means an expert on executive functioning, but so much research is coming out these days about the importance of executive functioning in children and their success in adulthood. And that's, in many ways very similar to what we're working on with children in early education environments. Um, but independence is an opportunity for celebration of what a child does for their own celebration. Independence is an opportunity to observe, what is this child really good at and where do they struggle? They struggle the most in remembering to brush their teeth. I wonder why that is. These are opportunities for us as the observers, us as the teachers, us as the leaders to question and to um, kind of problem solve what's going on. So absolutely independence is a huge part of why we do what we do, and the way that we set up our environments is intended for that independence. Um, I'll give you a quick example, Jill. So in one of the schools that I worked at, we had a snack table, and children throughout the morning work period were welcome to go and eat snack at their leisure whenever their body told them they were hungry. Um, and next to the snack table was a shelf. And in that shelf, there were placemats, there were plates, there were napkins, there were forks and spoons, things that you would need to eat a snack. But also next to that shelf and the table where was hanging on the wall a broom, a dustpan, and like a crummer where they could pick up their own crumbs. So the child, after time learned, I'm hungry. That does not just mean eat a snack. That means setting the table, getting my snack, eating it. And then, as a kind member of this classroom, and because I know someone's going to use this space after me, then I'm going to clean up my mess. And, it sounds impossible, maybe to some. But if the child learns that these are steps to take, they can take them. And there's not a teacher hovering around that space constantly cleaning up the mess and wiping the tables. Of course, if there's, different solutions being used, like disinfectant or something like that, then sure. But the goal is for the children to complete their tasks on their own because they can. They have the capacity to do it. And if we set them up for success using the environment, modeling it ourselves, and also the consistency, they will gain that skill and it will start to translate in other areas of their life too. I've seen it many, many times. And I'm excited for you all to start seeing it too.
Mm. And it really is interesting that that broom and dustpan is also relevant if you're taking some of the tray of the glass work and lo and behold, something falls. It's like, oh, well, I guess you'll need to sweep it up.
Yep.
And so we practice the sweeping from young, right? And that is such a different philosophy.
It's very different. I have a toddler, a son. He's going to be 3 next month. When he was about He's been in Montessori school since he was 1, but when he was about, I would say, I don't know, 15 months or so, he was very curious in the cupboards, and I was cooking and he was hanging around the kitchen. Um and I don't know, I turned around to wash a dish or something, and I left one of the cabinets um open, and he found a bag of sugar, and the sugar fell on the ground. It was, an exploration. And I turned around, and my immediate instinct was, I guess, something very similar to anger. Like, why did you do that? And he got up and went to his little station where the broom is. And he didn't clean it up. He was 15 months. He could not do it, but he knew that that was what he needed to do if he made a mess. Right. So, um, I think I remember that constantly. And if we set the child up for success, the broom, his child-sized broom he knew exactly where it was. It was always in the same place. It's still in the same place. And he knows that after things spill, we clean it up. There was no need to cry. There was no need to fuss. There was no need to make a bigger mess. It was just like, whoops, let's go get the broom. So, it's really wonderful how much the children are absorbing. And if we can offer them opportunities for independence all the time, that will start to become their lifestyle.
Exactly. And it's a real point where you go into the observation, which allows the responsiveness rather than the reaction, right? And so that's where there's such a fundamental difference. Whereas if we allow ourselves to get curious, which comes with the observation, I wonder why, or just like, oh, look, how did that happen? Oh, I'm curious how that happened. Then what do you think needs to happen now? And it allows the time, it allows the breath in order to facilitate the empowerment of the child or teen or adult, whatever the situation is. It won't be, breaking a glass maybe, but it's about like, oh, I'm curious, why did you feel you needed to react that way? Like be responsive rather than reactive. And it does start young.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's where the observation comes in. And the way that we observe children is very similar to the way that we observe adults. But depending on whatever your role is, if you're a teacher, then you will likely observe the children. If there's someone else working in your space, you might observe them too. But as a school leader, my job is to observe the children and also the adults. And offer them feedback for growth too. So, in the classroom, we're not just talking about the children, we're also talking about every body in there, what they're doing, and how, many times we're not aware of what we do. We're not aware of what we're doing until someone, with grace and courtesy and kindness and love are able to share with us, here are my observation notes at around 9:22. I noticed that when, little Johnny was working with watercolors, he set up his material and you noticed that it seemed like you noticed he didn't have any water, so you went to grab the water for him. Do you remember doing that? Why? I wonder what would happen if you just would have waited to see if Johnny would have figured out that he was forgetting his water. Or if he didn't and he tried to paint watercolors without water, what would have happened and what would he have learned? So these opportunities for observation, they absolutely have to come from a place of love. And Montessori teaches us to observe objectively, to remove any of our emotions, but I would argue that we have to have love when we're observing. We have to have love when we're observing, and we have to have love when we're delivering the message. um, because you know I imagine that all of you who are doing what you do have some aspect of love. You must love your job, or you must love your calling, or have a passion, or you're trying to grow the love. And doing the things with love is going to take us further than not.
Profound wisdom, which honestly ties in with some of our messaging within this summit, which is the power of the heart. And when we work with it consciously, it does shift the energy. Things all relate to the energy. And we are actually empowered to create our reality intentionally through that awareness. So you're definitely in the theme of our overall discoveries as leaders and the power that we do carry. Um, and then I also wanted to just ask about the building of community. Like, how do you facilitate building of community? I know that in my Montessori teaching experience, the power of that morning circle where we were sitting on the floor, getting grounded together side by side and connecting, allowing different voices to be heard rather than always the teacher, helped to facilitate that community building. And I wonder what you have to say about that.
That's a really great question. Um, if we're talking about classrooms, that is the child's space. That is the space for the child to shine. That is not the space for the teacher to shine. That is not the platform from which the teacher, should be sharing all of her accolades. There's other places where you should do that. And I believe that you should absolutely share your accolades and how amazing you are. But the classroom is for the children. So it's only natural that community is built through the children. That might look like a morning circle. That might look like reminding everyone about the grace and courtesy limits outside and inside, right? That might be modeling, treating every single child with respect. I think that also is important to think about, you know, the differences between equity and equality. And I'm thinking of, let's say, like a primary classroom, so 3 to 6 years old. Um, there might be children who are wanting to speak up in circle time, or want to choose the book, or want to be, the person who puts the calendar number in the slit. Um, and then there's children who don't. And there's children who are learning and processing differently and want to observe and absorb what's happening without feeling like the spotlight is on them. So, part of the way that we build community is by getting to know every single member of our community individually and then coming together as a whole. I think that balancing those two is exactly how we do that. The same can be said for adults. Like I said, I lead a team of 18 um, guides right now, and it was only through getting to know them very individually that I'm able to build that community with them as a group and ensure that when we do have, staff meetings or opportunities for being together, that they feel comfortable, that they feel like that is a space for them because they are valued, whatever they come with, whether, speaking from adults, whether it be their religion or their their personal experiences, that those are acknowledged, those are valued, and those are respected. So the way that we build community is by getting to know the individual. by getting to know the individual and remembering and reminding that they are important, that they matter, that they're valued, that they belong. Um, that's how I would say we build community.
So it's a path of individualization rather than conformity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a path of um, humbling yourself as the leader, whether it's a school leader or the classroom leader or a leader, whatever sort, and understanding that you don't know everything. You don't know everything about this person or about um, what you think you know about this person, and letting their light shine on you, and then, and then bringing it all together. So respecting the individual and balancing that with, you know, leading the team. That's hard. It's hard to do. It's hard work. That's usually one of the things that we talk about with when I start to work with new leaders, people who are new to leadership roles, is how do you do that? It's not easy. It's not easy. It's an art. And if you lead with the heart and if you have the energy and if you believe in yourself or have people around you who believe in you, it will be that much easier.
And it's recognizing it's a process. It doesn't have to be done and now you're done and now you're bravo, you got the A. No,
If
it's about
only.
a philosophy of lifelong learning for all of us,
For
right?
all of us. For all of us, yourself included. Please, whoever's watching this, don't forget about yourself. I'm happy that you're here. I'm happy that you're taking this opportunity to learn for yourself or for others on your team. And don't stop doing that.
Exactly. And it really is a shift from any of us having to be the sage on stage to the guide by the side, right? That's so interesting that Montessori embraces the guide rather than even the teacher or the knowledgeable one. It's we are in a community of learners, and of course, I'm the one responsible as the teacher, but you are also really curiously interested in the individual and the spirit within and what unique talents each individual has in order to cultivate those.
Right.
Mm. And I just also wanted to mention, I really liked what you had to say about grace and courtesy, that communication was, or that consistency was the key, and communication and the way that we communicate. And I wondered if you wanted to revisit any part of that.
Sure. Grace and courtesy is one of my favorite topics to talk about because it's one of the first that as an adult we forget. It's so easy. Life is hard. Let me just make sure we are all aware. Life is hard. It is May 19th, 2022. Life is the life around us. I mean, the world that we live in, it can be hard. And if it's hard for me, who've already been on this earth for decades, I can imagine that it's hard also for little humans who are navigating things sometimes for the very first time. And it is our responsibility to be able to teach the children what they need to know. And sometimes that's needing to know how to how to be upset, why it's okay to be upset, why it's okay to feel sad, angry, frustrated, happy, joyous, excited, jealous. These are parts of the human experience that we should not suppress. Rather, we should take the opportunity to teach the child ways in which they can, you know, gather that. If you work with children who are under the age of 6 usually, but maybe even 9 in some cases, they're developing language and ways to speak in different situations. So you might have a child who is very verbal and is able to, speak in understandable sentences, etc. But this child might not know how to communicate that they're excited and or that they want to play with you. And those are things that we can teach them, right? Like that's an opportunity for learning. Um, so communication is huge in grace and courtesy. Sometimes the communication is nonverbal, which, just to throw a wrench in things, sometimes that communication is nonverbal. And sometimes that communication is as simple as putting in a chair. What are we teaching about communication when we push back in our chair? We're teaching that I understand that if I'm done with something, I can put it away and it's ready for the next person to come. If my chair is out, somebody might trip, sure. Someone might pass by and think, I wonder if someone's still sitting here because they didn't push in their chair. So, these are nuances of ways that what we're teaching in very small opportunities can translate into larger ones.
Powerful. And do you use the peace rose within your teachings?
I don't, but I have seen it done before. I do work with some teachers right now who have peace corners, or rose corners, or whatever they call it. Essentially, the idea is that there is a physical space where children can go to. Sometimes it's calm down, sometimes it's take a deep breath, sometimes it's just to feel peace. So that's not something that I use particularly, but I do see it working very successfully in many environments. One of the things that you have to remember is that it must feel authentic to you. So you can't, in the age of social media, I see a lot of posts from teachers of different philosophies, some traditional, some public school teachers, and some Montessori, or different types of philosophies, where they're kind of showing their best practices, right? And this is how I set up my wall, or this is how I set up my cubbies. Um, and the inclination is to replicate that. Like, oh, that worked for her. That worked so well. I'm going to try it too. But what we should pause and do first is like, does this make sense for my community? Am I being authentic to myself? Do I believe this? And am I going to be able to maintain the goals of this? Maybe the answer is yes, and maybe the answer is no. So while the Peace Corner works for many, many teachers and many, many children, I honestly believe that the reason it works is because the teacher is so passionate about it, understands it, and is able to clearly communicate it to the children as for what what the purpose is. Whereas I don't think I would be able to. So, it's not a right or wrong or a yes or no. It's a, does this work for your space, and does this work for you question that we need to ask first.
And this is a powerful closure for us. Is it that that recommendation brings us back to the power of our own spirit within, because here our context is integrating mind, body, spirit, right? Well, we have got to be connected to our own internal spirit, what feeds us, what's real. And the more that we are connecting from that source power, then we can overflow with it energetically into our local environments to transform them in whatever way that our inner spirit compels us. And I just love that you named this authenticity aspect, because it really is fundamental that we are seeing ourselves as ever able to grow and what's real for me.
Right. The authenticity is going to be the most important part, and in some ways the hardest part, because it's easy to, you know, buy some supplies and set them up so that they look so beautiful. But it's much harder to identify, what are my triggers? What feels like home? Um, where am I the happiest? What do I do best? Those are harder questions. And my suggestion in your journey to authenticity, and in your journey to identifying those questions, to be able to, to be the transformed adult before we can transform education, is to work with someone else. Doesn't it can be your colleague, it can be your supervisor, it could be your partner, it could be anyone, but someone who really cares, and someone who's willing to ask those questions. The work that can come from that is profound. Honestly, it's amazing.
Bringing us to the self-awareness that leads to conscious leadership. Mm. Wow. Well, what a wealth of information. I really am so glad to be able to benefit from these pearls of wisdom. Do you have any last one that you'd like to share?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I hope that what I spoke about today inspires someone somewhere. And I really, really, really look forward to connecting with everyone who watches this. And if you have any questions, that's wonderful. And if you have something else on your mind, I'm absolutely available to connect about that too.
Thank you, Cecily. I say namaste to you.
Namaste.
Hmm.